What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton could have signed his sentence within Ferrari just 3 races after starting the season? What really happened in Azerbaijan so that the 7-time world champion would launch such a devastating bomb against his own team? What you are going to listen will not leave you indifferent. What was lived in Azerbaijan was not simply a bad result for Ferrari. It was a silent implosion, a crack that opened from within, marked by a revelation that no Cavallino fan expected to hear so early in the season. Lewis Hamilton, a 7-time world champion, the most media figure that has dressed in red in years, broke the expected script and expressed himself with a surgical coldness that left everyone breath in the paddock. Baku should be a turning point. Ferrari arrived after days of promising simulations with a car that had shown speed flashes in the tests. And although Australia and China had been discrete races, the hope of seeing the SF-25 finally exploit its potential was legitimate. Even in Friday's free training, everything seemed to be on the right track. Hamilton was the fastest in the second session, achieving an apparent synergy with the car that few hoped to see so soon. But the illusion lasted exactly to the classification session. In Q2, Hamilton was eliminated in the middle of a track that betrayed him curve after curve. The car did not respond, it was erratic, and its immediate reaction was not of emotional frustration, but of raw evaluation. Without ornaments or diplomacy, he described the SF-25 as an unpredictable and unstable car. And he said it in front of the media, with the engineers still downloading the data, with the mechanics around them, and with Charles Leclerc next to it, processing their own accident in Q3. It was a statement with political, technical, and symbolic weight. It is not usual for a pilot of his caliber, in a team like Ferrari, to issue such a severe trial. Less even when only 3 races have passed. But he did it, and he did it with the conviction of who knows that his voice is as powerful as his hands behind the wheel. What Hamilton transmitted was not anger or despair, it was informed disappointment. A kind of rational disenchantment that resulted in a clear message for Maranello. This is not what they promised me. In the race, things were not better. Hamilton finished 8th, fighting more against the erratic behavior of the car than against his rivals. There was no rhythm, there was no trust, and above all, there was no sense of progress. Leclerc, with a destroyed car after his accident in the Q3, 9th ended. Ferrari, who had arrived in Baku with the intention of enacting to the fight for the title, went with 2 cars outside the top 7 and an obvious crisis of trust. But the most alarming was not the result. It was the narrative that Hamilton imposed. His words not only criticized a failed weekend, they questioned the very essence of the SF-25 project. A car that should be the mature evolution of the SF-24, a car built to fight you with McLaren and Red Bull, but that on the track behaves as a failed prototype, as a machine still without a soul, without balance, without direction. What Hamilton has done in Baku is to plant a flag in the middle of a technical battlefield. He has drawn a line between tolerance and demand, between what he is willing to accept and what not. And in that line, it has made it clear that the margin of error in Ferrari has already exhausted. That is the real break, not that of the car with the track, nor that of the result with the expectations. The rupture was between the pilot and the promise. Among the Lewis Hamilton that he signed by Ferrari dreaming of a glorious career closure, and the one who is currently trapped in a project that, at least for now, does not allow him to show his true level. What seemed a simple criticism of Hamilton after a disappointing weekend ended up becoming an act of deep revelation. An exposure without anesthesia of the most critical structural defects of the SF-25. And when a Lewis Hamilton caliber pilot launches such an accusation, the effect is not limited to Maranello's walls. It extends as a seismic wave to the entire Formula One. The first thing to understand is that this was not an isolated complaint. It was the result of weeks of technical accumulation, simulator inputs, comparative analysis between both pilots, and contained frustrations that found their exhaust valve in Baku. Hamilton did not talk about vague sensations. He talked about concrete facts, of mechanical and aerodynamic symptoms that indicate a deep pathology in the SF-25 DNA. The most alarming problem indicated by the British, and was later confirmed by internal sources of the equipment, is a structural instability in the rear axle of the car. Under variable load conditions, such as strong brakes followed by lateral acceleration, the car loses stiffness at the back, generating microdisplace in suspension geometry. The result, a rear train that changes behavior in the middle of a curve. For any pilot, this is hell. But for one like Hamilton, which bases its style on blindly trusting the rear axle response when attacking the curve entrance, it is directly an insurmountable obstacle. But this was only the beginning. The second great failure that emerged after Azerbaijan is even more worrying, a critical thermal asynchrony between the two axes of the car. That is, the rear tires reach their optimal temperature window much faster than the strikers. The problem: while the rear train already has traction and power delivery, the striker does not yet offer enough adherence. The car then behaves like two disconnected halves, unable to work in harmony. The result is a total loss of balance in key phases, the exit of slow curves, aggressive changes, and above all, the first laps of classification. Where performance is needed the most, it is when they lose it the most. And here another key error enters the architecture of the SF25. Ferrari opted this year to return to the pull rod type front suspension system, a configuration that they did not use since 2015. This technical choice was motivated by an alleged aerodynamic advantage in the management of the lower flow towards the diffuser, but the sacrifice was great: to lose ability to absorb and read the asphalt in the front. With this architecture, the car becomes more susceptible to subwiring, especially in low-speed curves, and the dynamic rigidity of the front train is increased. In a car that already suffers thermal imbalance, this decision aggravated the problem. Hamilton has been clear: SF25 does not allow to push. It does not offer the stable platform. You need to stop late, attack the pianos, or train early. Each curve becomes a Russian roulette of unexpected reactions. The car does not warn, it does not anticipate. React late and bad. And when in Formula One you cannot anticipate what your car is going to do, you are condemned to survive, not to compete. But worst of all, these are not tuning problems. They are not solved with wing changes or adjustments in convergence. They are design failures, vices of origin that affect the whole philosophy of the car. What Ferrari has in his hands is not a difficult car. It is a fundamentally defective car for the type of demand imposed by the 2025 calendar. If that were not enough, Fred Vasseur admitted another blow after Baku, a loss of power in the hybrid system, specifically in energy recovery. In a circuit like Azerbaijan, with long lines that depend on the efficiency of the ERS, losing kilowatts can mean up to 0.2 by return. In classification, that leaves you out of Q3. In the race, it condemns you to fight teams that, in theory, should be far behind. When structural instability, thermal imbalance, unfavorable suspension configuration, and electrical energy lost together, the result cannot be other than what we saw in Baku: a broken Ferrari. A car that is not only far from winning, but is barely in a position to score. The diagnosis made by Hamilton is not just a technical criticism. Within Ferrari, they were not lived as a simple criticism. They were interpreted as an accurate shot to the heart of a structure that was already weakened. It was a direct message to the leadership of Frederic Vasseur, to the technical department, to the track engineers, and ultimately to the complete philosophy of the rampant Cavallino. It was not an expression of helplessness, it was an ultimatum. In Maranello, the pressure is felt from the first mechanic to Vasseur's last meeting with the engineering dome. And when there is pressure, decision-making becomes erratic. The team needs time, but Formula One does not grant it. Each race counts. Each technical error is paid in public. And with the new sprint weekend format, the margins to test solutions have been minimized. The diagnosis after Baku leaves no doubt. Ferrari has a car that is not only inefficient, but contradicts the needs of his pilots. Leclerc cannot push with confidence. Hamilton is forced to change his driving style. And both are already in a frustration curve that threatens to climb to political levels within the team. Ferrari's internal structure is exposed, vulnerable. There's no visible contingency plan. There are no aggressive updates on the horizon. There's no optimistic speech. What there is uncertainty. And that in Formula One is worse than a slow car. Because speed can be found. The address, not always. After what happened in Baku, the narrative that surrounds Ferrari has completely changed. It is no longer if they can compete. It's about whether they can sustain themselves. What Lewis Hamilton has made with his statements, with his technical evaluation, and with his body language even inside the car has been to light a red alert that resonates beyond the classification or the points of the championship. And now, the question falls on you, spectator. Are we facing the chronicle of a divorce announced between Hamilton and Ferrari? Or is this simply the necessary moment of rupture that precedes historical reconstruction? Does this car really have a short-term solution, or the 2025 season is convicted for Maranello before arriving in Europe? What is clear is that the Ferrari-Hamilton project is at its first large crossroads. And the most disturbing thing is that it has arrived too soon. When a technical and emotional structure thus wobbles in just 3 races, the entire seasonal story changes. It is no longer just about winning races. It is about surviving internal pressure, to maintain morality, to sustain the credibility of a team that cannot afford another failure. So tell me what you think. Do you think Hamilton should have been more diplomatic with his criticism? Or did it do the right thing to point out what many inside the paddock already intuited? Are we seeing a leader who tries to rescue Ferrari from within, or a champion who realized too late that he opted for the wrong project? Your analysis is key. Leave it in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't done it yet.